Didn't cry on the drive home. Not when I merged onto the 401, not when I passed the Oshawa exit, not even when I pulled into my driveway at 11:30 at night and sat in the dark for 20 minutes with the engine off. I just sat there thinking about the joint account, the lease co-signed under my name, and the fact that my sister's rehearsal dinner had just ended with her telling me, in front of her future in-laws and half of Whitby, that I had no idea what family means. I knew exactly what family meant. I had been paying for it for 3 years. Let me back up. My sister. I'll call her my sister because that's what she is, even now. Even after everything, is 4 years older than me. She married young, had her son young, and when her marriage ended, she was 31 with a toddler, a car note she couldn't cover, and a basement apartment in Pickering that smelled like carpet mold. I was 27. I had just finished my second year at a marketing firm in Toronto, and I was making decent money for someone my age. Not rich, comfortable, responsible with it, which was more than anyone in my family had ever expected from me because I was always the quiet one, the one who kept her head down and nobody paid attention to. When my sister called me crying that November, I drove to Pickering at 9 at night and I sat on her couch and I listened. And then I made a decision I didn't tell anyone about. I called my bank the next morning and set up an automatic transfer. $600 a month, going into an account I'd opened in both our names, but set up so only I could see the full transaction history. She saw deposits. She thought it was a government top-up she'd applied for that was finally coming through. I never corrected her. I know how that sounds, but I knew my sister. If she'd known it was from me, she would have refused it out of pride, or worse, she would have accepted it and resented me for it. Either way, it would have turned into a fight, so I said nothing. I just paid. 600 turned into 800 when her son started school and the before and after care costs hit. It turned into 1200 when her landlord raised the rent and she couldn't absorb it. I also quietly paid for her car insurance renewal one March when she texted me she was thinking of letting it lapse. I told her I'd found a deal through work and handled it before she could ask questions. Her grocery bills twice, a dentist appointment for my nephew that she thought she'd covered with a payment plan. I had called ahead and settled the balance. My parents knew none of this. My extended family knew none of this. As far as everyone was concerned, my sister was getting back on her feet through her own resilience, and I was just the younger one who worked in Toronto and seemed fine. I was fine. I was also exhausted and eating a lot of pasta. My sister got engaged in April. His name is Theo, her fiancé, and he's a perfectly decent person who works in logistics and has a beard he is extremely proud of. I genuinely like Theo. This story is not about Theo. The engagement moved fast. They set a date for September, found a venue in Burlington, and suddenly I was a bridesmaid with a list of responsibilities that landed in my inbox before I'd even been officially asked. Dress fittings, bachelorette weekend in Niagara, bridal shower, contribution toward a gift that my maid of honor sister-in-law had already decided would be a weekend at a spa in Muskoka. I said yes to all of it because she was my sister, because I had always said yes to all of it. The rehearsal dinner was on a Friday. It was at a private room in a steakhouse in Burlington, booked by Theo's parents, who are lovely people from Oakville who used the word lovely themselves approximately 40 times over the course of the evening. There were maybe 30 people there. My parents, my aunt and her husband, several of Theo's family members I was meeting for the first time. I was seated at the far end of the table, which I noted but didn't say anything about. Somewhere around the main course, Theo's mother asked my sister how she'd managed as a single mom for those years before Theo. It was a kind question, genuinely curious. My sister smiled and said, "Honestly, I just figured it out. I'm stubborn. I don't like asking for help. I just put my head down and made it work." I looked down at my plate. Theo's older brother, loud, a little too much wine in him, said, "That's impressive. A lot of people would have just leaned on family and expected handouts." My sister laughed. She actually laughed. And then she said, "Oh, I would never do that. I've always believed you earn what you have." I put my fork down. I wasn't going to say anything. I want to be clear about that. I had decided somewhere around the salad course that this was her night and I would simply exist quietly in my chair and drive home and process my feelings about it some other time, like a normal adult. But then my aunt, who has never once in her life read a room, leaned across the table toward me and said, loudly enough for the nearest 8 people to hear, "Aren't you proud of your sister? She did it all on her own." And my sister looked at me. She looked right at me with this small smile, and she said, "Some people in this family still don't understand what it means to actually struggle. Must be nice to just coast." The table went a little quiet. I looked at her. She held eye contact. She was daring me, right there in front of Theo's entire family, to either embarrass her or swallow it. I swallowed it. I said, "Congratulations again. The venue is beautiful." And I excused myself to the washroom and stood over the sink for 4 minutes looking at my own face in the mirror. On the drive home, I started doing math. 3 years of transfers, car insurance, the dentist, the 2 grocery runs, a cosign on her current lease. Her landlord had required a guarantor, and she'd asked me quietly, and I'd said yes without a second thought. Total, somewhere close to $40,000. She had just told a table full of people that she'd done it all on her own. I am not someone who acts in anger. I want to say that clearly. What I did next took me 2 weeks of thinking, 3 conversations with my best friend, who I'll call my best friend because she's the one person in this who knew everything, and one very long walk along the waterfront trail in Pickering at 7 in the morning, where I made my decision and felt completely calm about it. I called my bank on a Monday. The joint account that my sister believed was some kind of government top-up. I closed it. The automatic transfer stopped. I didn't tell her. There was no dramatic phone call. I just stopped. Then I called the property management company that managed her rental building. I was listed as the lease guarantor. I gave them notice, in writing, that I would be removing myself as guarantor at the time of her next renewal, which was coming up in 3 months. I was polite. I was clear. I asked for confirmation in writing, which they sent. Then I called my insurance broker and had my name taken off the policy I'd been quietly renewing on her behalf. I gave 2 months' notice. None of this was illegal. None of it was cruel, technically. I was simply stopping things I had been doing voluntarily, without anyone's knowledge, for 3 years. The first sign that something had shifted came about 6 weeks later. My sister called me on a Tuesday evening. She sounded weird, careful, like she was testing the water temperature before stepping in. "Hey," she said, "did something change with that account? The deposit didn't come this month." I said, "What account?" She paused. "The one I've been getting the deposits from, the monthly ones." I said, "Oh, that was me." Silence. "What do you mean? That was you." "I set it up after you and your ex split. I didn't want to make it weird, so I just ran it quietly. But I've closed it." Another pause, longer this time. "For how long?" she said. "About 3 years." I could hear her breathing change. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't think you'd accept it if I'd asked." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Okay, but why did you close it?" I said, "I think you said it best at the rehearsal dinner. You've always believed you earn what you have." I heard her inhale sharply. I said, "Congratulations again, by the way. I hope the wedding is everything you planned." And I ended the call. She texted me that night, then again the next morning. Then my mother called. Apparently, my sister had told her some version of events in which I had pulled the rug out from under her for no reason. My mother left a voicemail asking me to call her back and explain myself. I didn't call back that day. I typed out a very detailed text message to my mother instead, including the dates, the amounts, and the specific moment at the rehearsal dinner that had clarified things for me. I kept the tone completely neutral. I was not mean. I listed facts. My mother read it and called my sister immediately. I know this because my best friend's cousin works with someone who knows my aunt, and word travels fast in a mid-sized Ontario suburb, let me tell you. The version that got around was predictably wrong. In the first version, I had stolen money from my sister. In the second version, I had promised to support her and then abandoned her right before the wedding. In the third version, my personal favorite, I had done this specifically to ruin the wedding. I did not ruin the wedding. I attended the wedding. I wore the dusty rose dress I had paid $240 for. I stood in the right place when they said to stand. I clapped when they kissed, and I smiled in every photograph. I gave a card with a thoughtful note inside and a gift card to a kitchen store because that was on the registry, and I am not going to let personal circumstances make me into the kind of person who gives a passive-aggressive gift at a wedding. But here's where it got complicated. 2 months after the wedding, my sister's lease came up for renewal. The property management company sent her the paperwork. Without a guarantor, her application had to be reevaluated. Her income at that point was part-time. She'd cut her hours when she and Theo moved in together, planning to go back full-time after the honeymoon, which had been pushed to January. The property management company declined to renew without a guarantor or a larger damage deposit. She called me in a panic. I answered, which I think surprised her. She said she needed me to stay on as guarantor just for another year, just until she and Theo got sorted, just temporarily. I said I understood it was stressful. I said I was sorry the timing was hard. I said I wasn't in a position to do that right now. She said, "You're really going to do this to me right before Christmas?" I said, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm not renewing something I set up voluntarily 3 years ago." She said some things after that. I'm not going to repeat them because they weren't fair and she was scared, and I've decided to give her that. People say unfair things when they're scared. But she also said one thing that I keep thinking about. She said, "You were always jealous of me. You've been waiting to do this." And I thought about that for a long time afterward. I turned it over and looked at it from different angles, like you look at something you found at the bottom of a bag, trying to figure out where it came from. I was not jealous. I was invisible. There's a difference. But I understand how someone who has never been invisible could confuse the two. My parents eventually found out the full picture. Not from me, from my mother's careful reading of the text message I'd sent her, which she apparently reread several times and then showed my father. My father called me on a Sunday afternoon and we had the most honest conversation we had ever had. He said he hadn't known. He said he was sorry. He said, and this caught me off guard, "You were always the one we didn't worry about. I think maybe we should have paid more attention." I didn't cry on that call either, but it was closer. The wedding photo came out beautifully, I'll say that. There's one from the reception where my sister and I are standing together and we're both laughing at something off camera. I think Theo had dropped his cake, and we look like two people who love each other, which underneath all of it, I think is still true. She and Theo found a townhouse in Oshawa. Theo's income qualified without a guarantor. They moved in January. She texted me a photo of my nephew's new room, which had a loft bed and a little desk, and it was the sweetest thing. And I cried at that, which I think says everything about what I actually wanted all along. We don't talk the way we used to. There's a politeness between us now that wasn't there before. A careful, deliberate politeness, like people handling something fragile. Maybe that will loosen. Maybe it won't. I'm not going to force it. What I know is this. I gave because I wanted to. I stopped because I had to. And the moment I chose myself, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of the quiet, clear understanding that I deserve to be seen, everything shifted. Not in a movie way, not with confrontations and apologies and a neat ending. Just in the way that things shift when you finally stop holding your breath. You don't even notice at first. You just realize, one ordinary Tuesday, that you've been breathing normally for a while now, and you can't remember exactly when it started. There's a moment I keep coming back to, not the rehearsal dinner, not the phone call, not even the lease paperwork. It's earlier than all of that. It's me, sitting in my car in a Pickering parking lot, transferring money into an account my sister thought was from the government, telling myself it was the right thing to do and not needing any credit for it. I believed, genuinely, that doing good quietly was its own kind of integrity, and I still think that's true. What I didn't understand then is that integrity without boundaries isn't a virtue. It's just a slow leak. My sister isn't a villain. I've thought about this a lot and I keep arriving at the same place. She told herself a story about who she was, resilient, self-made, too proud to take handouts, and she told it so many times it became real to her. That's not unique to her. Most of us are walking around inside a version of ourselves that's at least partly fictional. The difference is what happens when the story gets tested. When Theo's brother said what he said and my sister laughed along, she had a choice. She chose the story over the truth, and the truth, which was sitting 4 seats down from her in a dusty rose dress, said nothing and drove home. I used to think that being the quiet one, the one who never asked for recognition, was a kind of strength. And maybe it was for a while. But there's a difference between choosing not to be seen and accepting that you're invisible. One is a decision. The other is something that happens to you while you're busy being agreeable. What I learned, not from any particular book or conversation, just from living through this, is that your choices compound, the small ones especially. Every month I transferred that money without saying a word. I was making a choice about what I was worth. Every time I said yes to a bridesmaid expense without being asked how I was doing, I was making a choice. Not wrong choices necessarily, but choices I made unconsciously, and that's the part that cost me. When I finally acted, I acted from clarity, not anger. That distinction matters more than people give it credit for. Anger burns fast and leaves a mess. Clarity is quieter. It just knows what's true and stops pretending otherwise. I didn't close that account to hurt my sister. I closed it because keeping it open had stopped making sense to me. And for the first time in 3 years, my own sense of things felt like enough of a reason. The lease, the insurance, the guarantor removal. None of it was punishment. It was me deciding that I was a person with limits, and that limits aren't a character flaw. They're just honest. My nephew texted me last month with a voice note. He's 7, so it was mostly background noise and him saying my name wrong. And I listened to it 3 times. That's the part of the story I think about when I need to remember why I didn't let the whole thing turn me cold. You can hold someone accountable and still love what's good in the picture. You can stop funding someone's life without writing them off as a person. That's the thing about making one quiet phone call. Nobody claps for you. Nobody knows what it costs to stay calm. But you know. And eventually that turns out to be enough.